predsjednik predavača, profesora Davida Brodija, da izlaže na svoj vrlo interesantan naslov, jer u centar svega je stavljena fizička aktivnost kao najbolja moguća stvar koju može da učini za svoje zdravlje. Mr. Brodie, please, podium is yours.
Dobro jutro. No more. Now you need to put the earphones on. Well, thank you for the organising committee for inviting me here. This is my first visit to Serbia and I hope it will not be my last. And thank you also for arranging the British weather to be here for today. I appreciate that as well. So my talk is going to be on exercise, the best medicine in the world, and I'm going to also talk generally about research activities in cardiovascular health, because this is the area which is most true to my heart. I'm going to start with an introduction to body composition, because this is particularly important as many developing societies and well-advanced societies increase the level of obesity. We've heard this mentioned already by the previous speaker, and it's something which we, as leaders who are trying, as you will be leaders trying to help people to maximise their health, will have to be particularly concerned about. Obesity is a growing menace, as we've heard before, and particularly the way it can lead on to diabetes and cardiovascular disease. So I'll introduce some aspects of body composition, and to first of all talk about some of the work we've been doing over the years in validating various types of equipment. Because if we can't measure these things with precision, then we shouldn't be measuring them at all. I also want to refer to the impact of intervention, particularly that of diet, and also want to talk about the impact of performance very briefly, and finally the impact of disease in terms of this particular problem of obesity. Now, there is a general concern for obesity, as I said earlier, throughout developing nations and developed nations, and in Britain at least we tend to use the body mass index as being an indication of someone's adiposity or obesity. In fact, we go further than that. In every single doctor's surgery in the United Kingdom, it's very common for height and weight to be measured, the body mass index to be calculated, and that to be the basis of decisions being made in terms of people's cardiovascular risk, combined, of course, with other features. And if you look at these figures, if you take the body mass index, which is weight in kilograms divided by height in meters squared, you can see that once you start to get a figure above 30, you're starting to move into moderate obesity levels, and as you go beyond that, you're getting to severe levels of obesity, areas for serious concern and for action to be taken. Let's just look at the body mass index of two individuals. We'll call the first subject FB, who has a body mass of 112 kilograms, a height of 190 centimeters, and if you calculate body mass index, you'll see that person has a body mass index of 31.1. The other subject, NT, has a mass of 108 kilograms, a height of 180, and a body mass index of 33.4. If you now refer back to the classification, you can see that those sort of body mass indexes of in that range there suggest that person was moderately obese, a cause for concern. Let's have a look at those individuals. Here they are. That's Mike Tyson and Frank Bruno. Obviously very excellent specimens in terms of fitness, and something which we would not be concerned about the level of obesity. The point I'm making is that it's often dangerous to take a very simple measure unless you make allowances for particular variations. And a highly muscled person, such as these boxers who may have a high BMI, body mass index, clearly are themselves very healthy. So we have to treat some of these things with caution and consider other methods perhaps of measuring something if we're going to then take particular action over that measurement. What we've been using fairly recently is a whole body potassium counter. Now this particular machine has a whole series of very sensitive counters which runs over the whole of the body and measures the extent of radioactive potassium within the body. Radioactive potassium is only found in lean tissue, and we all have this within our bodies. To measure this, you have to have a very well protected counter with great big lead-lined rooms. We have to keep this in the basement of hospitals because we have to make sure that any other radiation, such as radiation from the sun, radiation from these fluorescent lamps, are kept well away from these very sensitive counters we have here. However, there was a problem in finding the lead for this surround, and the problem was that towards the end of the Second World War, when the first atomic bomb was released, it consequently meant that every single piece of lead throughout certainly Europe was suitably irradiated and therefore could not be used for this particular piece of equipment. So what was the solution? Did anyone guess what the solution was to obtain lead which was not radioactive? Well, there was just one place where we could get them from, and that was when the German fleet was scuttled in Scapa Flow off Scotland. Then the lead that was there was now underwater by a considerable amount, and it's that lead from those warships is what is used in this particular piece of equipment. And if you build another one of those, they send a diver down and get a bit more lead from this particular source. So it's an interesting historical fact that if you build one of these whole body counters, you do need to be very careful about selecting your lead. And we've used this equipment in a number of longitudinal studies, one of which was to establish that school children, we noticed that there was a difference between the rate at which their bones were getting more dense and the rate at which they were growing. And we found the difference was something like 15 months between the initial adolescent spurt, growth spurt, and the way the bones in their legs were getting sufficiently dense to cope with their increased length. This means they are subject at that particular age to fractures, and one of the reasons why one has to be cautious with strenuous exercise with children who are going through a rapid growth spurt. Other methods of measuring body composition include underwater weighing, and this technique was used as the gold star, or the best method, best convenient method for many years, and many pieces of equipment have been compared against underwater weighing. More recently, electrical impedance has been an alternative, where we're looking for the resistance of tiny electrodes to the flow through the body, and that was predominantly affected by the tissues which had high proportions of water. This has been shown in terms of broad epidemiological studies to be very successful. So we have validation studies on a variety of types of equipment. We have efficacy of very low-calorie diets have been used as part of our research, and to show that these very low-calorie diets, which had a lot of interest about 20 years ago, in fact are quite safe in terms of the effects on vital organs. Since then, we've been looking at the use of dual-energy X-ray absorbed geometry, and this system allows us to measure various components of body composition. This is a difficult slide to see, but if you look here, you can see that it gives such things as the percentage of fat in various parts of the body. It gives the percentage of the tissue and the lean proportion in various parts of the body. So this system can give us quite a lot of detail now of the specific components of the body, not only looking at the division between fat and lean tissue. Then, of course, more recently we move on to the MRI scan, and this is the point where we can now use this to give us a very precise estimate of body composition and subsequently adiposity. Here is an MRI machine, and of course they're a very big investment, not available commonly to all researchers, but are now increasingly being found in hospitals and gives us the opportunity to examine body composition in this way. This is one of my favourite figures. You may well recognise this particular David here, Michelangelo's David, but you may not recognise that David there. That in fact is me, another David. I've been sliced up using MRI, and the consequence of being sliced up like that is that you can then regenerate a series of proportions of 4 or more tissues throughout the body. At the time this was done, which was some 20 years ago now, I was the first person to be sliced up like that who was actually living. There had been 2 dead people in America. They were both criminals who had been executed, and they were subjected to MRI scanning, and then subsequently they were carved up, and their details of their body composition were compared between the MRI and their actual dissection. I wasn't prepared to be dissected. I thought that was a little bit too extreme, but the consequence of that particular experiment was that for the first time we got a body volume composition in this sort of detail. And you can see this is me going from my 0 height to 187 centimetres, and having been sliced through by the MRI every 3 millimetres, you can produce a very comprehensive analysis of the proportion of bone, muscle, fat